to the main event. So, welcome to Chris Cox, who will tell us what he's going to tell us.
Okay. All right. I'm on. Good. That's encouraging. Good. Okay. So it's about 20 years since Acorn shut the doors to the computer bit, and I'd kind of not done it ever since I joined it and then left right at the end. I thought it would be really quite worthwhile just to sort of spend a bit of time talking about what happened. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through sort of my story with Acorn in those last few years it ran, because I didn't join it until quite late on. So, but before I do that, just a little bit of background about me, which you may or may not have gathered. So I went to university in Cambridge, which was lucky, which was very nice. And shortly after that, I got a job in the North Sea, working for a company called Schlumberger. So I was working out on the rigs doing wireline logging, actually, was what I did, if anybody knows what that's like. And then after that, I got a job working for 10 years with a company called Gould, and they made oscilloscopes, was the bit I worked for, but they made all sorts of other test and measurement equipment as well. And so I actually worked in a factory. We physically made the boards, put the components down, all of those kinds of things. And as part of that, at one point, I went and spent some time in Silicon Valley. This was before the dot-com boom, I might point out. So I was working in Cupertino in a biomation plant, which was another part of Gould then that made logic analyzers. And I was selling our products throughout America. So I'd done a variety of different things. When I was at university, my degree is actually in physics. So naturally, I ended up in marketing. So this is just an obvious transition, isn't it, for anybody doing that? So I've been working for Gould for a long time, and I lived in Cambridge, lived just outside Cambridge in a village called Histon, and the office I worked at was in northeast London, and I used to drive up and down the M11 every day. And that's a tough old commute. I mean, it's quite a long way, and it was taking its toll. I had a young family, and it just wasn't great. And a job came up in our village. It's like, yay! So I applied for it with this company called Acorn. I sort of vaguely knew about it. I wasn't any kind of an Acorn fan or anything, but it was in the education department. And I thought, well, I could maybe try that. So I applied, and I got a letter back saying basically, no, but we do have this other job. So this was the actual letter I've got. So I got a letter. So what I'm going to do as I talk is I will pass around various bits of paper that may or may not be of any interest to anybody. But that was the job description I started with, because if anybody knew me from back in those days, you would have known me as the guy that ran the enthusiast market sector, which is kind of interesting. So I just raided some of the paperwork that I'd retained. So you'll see various different bits and pieces. So they switched me to this enthusiast job, and I had an interview with a guy called Peter Bonder, and I tell you not, I don't kid you, it's the worst interview I've ever done, ever, for anything. And I went away on holiday afterwards. There's no way I've got that. Got back from holiday to find lots of messages saying, we want to give you a job. For some reason I couldn't quite comprehend. So, okay. So I joined Acorn actually on the 2nd of January 1995 as the sales and marketing manager for the enthusiast market sector, reporting to Peter Bonder. And it's kind of weird because I wasn't an enthusiast, all right? So whatever you may have seen of me in the past, I wasn't. I didn't really know anything about Acorn computers. I was blagging it massively. But it was really nice because the place where we worked was actually based in Histon on a place called the Vision Park in Histon. And it was a beautiful building, a really lovely building, which is now home to GW Pharmaceuticals. And if anybody's ever heard of them, they do cannabinoid development. So that's the current occupant of that building that Acorn was in for a little while, and it was beautiful. There was a lake outside the building. There was a little sandwich place. You could have lunch, sit by the lake, watch the. I mean, it's just magical. And I was working with a really nice team of people. So my training to get me into this thing was there was a junk room full of miscellaneous random bits of kit that might or probably didn't work. And my mission was to build one of those tower things that Peter was always very keen on, with lots of different slices and SCSI drives and this, that, and the other. And nothing worked. I mean, like nothing ever worked. It was always, it was horrendous. So that was how I learned how Acorn computers work, was by making something like that. how the RISC OS type machines worked, doing something like that. So for those just thinking about the building again, that is actually our floor plan. That was the floor plan with everybody's desks on. So if you want to see who sat where in Acorn back in the day, then we actually produced these things with floor plans on. So do pass these around and have a look at different things. So yeah, so I was working for. Oh no, that's a later one. That's something completely different. So one of the first things that we did is we had this idea about this enthusiast sector, and what we really wanted to try and do was build up the waves of people, because we had these people that were all over the place who were really enthusiastic about Acorn computers. It was like running a fan club, and it was fantastic because what we wanted to do was try and encourage them, make them feel that they belonged, and so for some reason we came up with this idea, which I never really liked, I've got to admit, of the clan. And I don't know if anybody remembers those. Yeah, so we came up with that idea of the clan, and we had little membership cards, which I did have one of those. Where did it go? There it is. There's my membership card, number 1360. Don't ask me why I ended up with that number, but there we go. But yeah, so we launched this thing to try and get some excitement, some enthusiasm to do things. I did my very first Acorn World show, which was quite an experience, actually. I don't know if any of you ever made it down to Acorn Worlds, but it was quite a big event at the time. So it was all really exciting. I was walking to work and everything. It was fantastic, and I got to know quite a lot of the community, people like the Van Someren brothers, because they were doing some of the most amazing stuff you've ever come across. Single-handedly writing web browsers, as Nico did. And then, I mean, Alex later went on to found a company called Encipher, which got sold out for some vast amount of money later on. But yeah, so and also their dad as well. So yeah, it was a really interesting time getting to know some of these people. Okay, so that's me. So that's Acorn. Well, I've been hired. We're working out this thing. Next, what happens is there's a big reorganisation, and this was actually in September. So I just joined this organisation. There's a big reorganisation, lots of layoffs, all sorts of, we're rearranging the whole way the business works. Sorry, there's some more clan newsletters and things there, for anybody that wants them. So we're relaunching the way the whole business works, and changing it all around and forming it into a variety of different divisions. So there was a division called Applied RISC Technologies under Peter Bonder. And there was an education division under a guy called Micah Reardon. And there was also, we'd already split out and separated off online media with Malcolm Bird, under Malcolm Bird. And because I was with the computer bit, not a technology, I was selling computers, I stayed in the education part, which wasn't great, to be honest, because it was, so there we go, there's the, wasn't ideal. That's the organisation chart post the September reorganisation. So you'll hear me go through these things as we go along through this whole process. So I stayed looking after the enthusiasts in that section. Now, at some point, I honestly can't remember the date of this, but I got called. So Acorn RISC Technologies moved out of this nice shiny building because we were getting rid of the nice shiny building because it was too expensive. And moved into a thing up Newmarket Road in Cambridge in quite a scruffy unit, which is where online media were based. So, I mean, it was okay. It was an office. And so they'd moved in. They had crates. They had, they were busy trying to do stuff. They were the mission of Applied RISC Technologies was really to take the technology that Acorn had developed to make computers and try and flog it to as many different people as they possibly could. And I got called in there by Peter, and we were sitting in an empty office on photocopy paper boxes. I remember, this is quite a vivid memory, I've got to say, because they hadn't got any furniture, right? So chairs didn't have that, but they had some boxes of photos. So we sat on those, and he said, what we need you to do is we want you to come and join us and sell as much as you can, make as much profit as possible to pay for what we're doing with the technology business. And if we're successful, there might be a job for you, but if we're not, there won't be. Are you up for that? So I said, yeah, absolutely, because this, honestly, education was a bit dead, right? And this was where, I mean, it was a lot more exciting. This is where all the engineers were, the RISC OS engineers were, and everything else. And so they were starting to do some quite interesting things. So I started there, and we had crates. You know those green shipping crates? We had piles of them like this. And it was about 4 or 5 months later when somebody said, do you realize how much these things cost? We need to get rid of them, take everything out of the crate. We didn't have time. Everybody was running at 1,000,000 miles an hour, trying to do something really kind of interesting. But what happened was that basically the computer sales bit, other than to schools and things, but the main computer sales bit, through all the dealer network and everything, had all these rules and it had built up over time. And when I took it on, it was me, right? I was the guy doing all of that. I mean, we had like people doing the shipping, we had people running warehouses, but fundamentally from the business end of it, all of that stuff, we just could make it up as we wanted to make things happen. So I remember talking to dealers going, well, are you sure you can do that? It's like, yeah, it's all right. If you want to buy some of these, just buy it. That's great. And that's kind of what I was doing. I was just, we had this stock, we had products, we were making them, we could sell them, and it was just trying to make things happen. And that went quite well, actually. That was quite good. It freed a bit of the shackles off. People could start doing deals and start doing stuff with it. And not just in the UK, but around Europe and some of the overseas dealers as well, because we had quite a strong overseas dealership in some countries. And slowly, over the next few months, I picked a few people out, because there was like more work than one person could sensibly do. So we got a few more people on, and we carried on doing that. Now, as part of that, during that time, Acorn were working with Oracle to develop the network computer. And somewhere in here, if I'd got it in the right order, it would have been better. Somewhere in here, yeah. So here's some of the data sheets and stuff on. That's the desk light. That's the thin client. So that's the sort of thing we were then promoting. Desk light computer. I think that's right. Is that right? Have I got that right? I should have. I had got this in the right order. Yeah, anyway, so...
Yeah, it's got the Citrix on it.
So, yeah, it's got the Citrix on it. It's got all that sort of stuff in it. Right, so that was all of that stuff. That's something else. Right, okay, so yeah, so we started doing this, and they signed a deal with Oracle. And it was the most amazing deal. Oracle paid Acorn quite a sizable chunk of money for the rights to pay Acorn for products. Right? Yeah, this was kind of like in there, and Larry Ellison actually came to Cambridge to sign that deal. And that was it. That was back in January of 1996. So yeah, so the development, not only did they pay some upfront money, they also paid the development costs of the product at about £1 million a quarter for a 1-year exclusivity. Right, so those are some quite interesting. So yeah, if you look back at that deal, it's like they really managed to sign that. It's quite an impressive thing. So the initial models were all ARM 7500 based, with 4 meg DRAM and a 14K4 modem, and Ethernet. Woo! Okay, so that is the kind of base level spec they went with for that thin client computing. And that was quite a big game changer, because if you think about a group that's doing technology, then this is quite different to what we were doing. And there was a tremendous amount of hype and buzz, and everybody was talking about that sort of thing as we went along. At that same time, about April, they formed Exemplar, which was a joint venture with Apple, to try and hive off the education bit, and then they were able to shut down the nice place in Histon and move that into a separate building. And working with them, alongside them, I spent time with them selling the internet to people, showing people the internet and what you could do with it. It's quite interesting when you look back now at the sort of things we were doing. It was quite exciting. Anyway, so that's the background. That's the big stuff that's going on in the organisation. But underneath all of that, there was this new chip that came out. It's called the Strong Arm. And it was really quite a big deal. And we were, because it took the power that we had up to a whole nother level. So we developed that board, for those of you that remember those. So that's an original prototype that had the wire mods taken off it and then pickled. Which a guy called Pete Fox made after we'd actually got them into production and they worked. So that was one of the original ones. Yeah, it really is. So this was tremendous success. From my point of view, this absolutely changed everything. Rather than just sort of selling stuff that was a bit, meh, this suddenly gave us something that was really, really exciting. And we really went for it. So we launched that at Acorn World in '96. And as part of that, I did a promotion. Now, I haven't got the copy of Byte, unfortunately. But we did a promotion where we put a key on the front cover of every Byte magazine. I don't know why I don't have a copy of that. I really ought to, but I don't. I've got the Clan one. And then we had this cage thing in Acorn World, and it was really exciting. So we did a big, this is kind of like trying to get stuff moving, trying to get people excited, trying to get people to, that's all the strong arm stuff, trying to get people to really bite on this, trying to broaden out a little bit beyond our own native base to actually get other people excited by it, because it was quite a big difference. So this cage that we had at Acorn World, quite a fun story, this, kind of got all this, had a big padlock on it, the keys, 4 of the keys of which would fit. Nobody ever won it, by the way, but 4 of them would fit. So we'd set it all up, and that night after we'd done the setup, I took the padlock with me back to the hotel, to look after it. And we went for a few beers in the bar. 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up in a sudden cold sweat going, where's the padlock? You know the way that happens sometimes? So it's like, where is it? I looked through my room. No, don't have it. It wasn't just beers. The chief executive, a guy called David Lee, was heavily into his whiskey at that point, which was kind of a bit harsh. But anyway, so so I couldn't find it. So I actually went back to the room we were sitting in. I tried to find somebody to ask. At 3 in the morning in a hotel, no chance. And so I was like, oh no, I've got this huge promotion going on, and we don't have a padlock, which is a bit of a nightmare. And so somebody else had noticed it. I forget who it was now, and had picked it up and brought it with them the next morning. And so were you looking for that? It's like, oh, yes. So yeah, it wasn't quite the disaster it might otherwise have been. So we did that. And that obviously made a big difference to RISC PC sales. It made a big difference to selling the original, to selling upgrades to people. It made a huge difference to the just general perception that we had a product that was actually quite up there with a lot of other things out on the market, as well as just the standard RISC OS stuff. It was really up there. And so we actually ended '96 making about £1 million worth of profit. And just in this little division making these computers, we ended up about £1 million and plus, which is pretty exciting, really. I mean, from a business, you're doing this thing, we're developing lots of things, we're making it all work. And then, so we moved into '97. Now, '97 was fairly stable as a year, so there's lots of work going on network computers and various other things. I actually built up a little team, so by about mid-'97, there were about 9 of us in this team, looking after various different aspects, doing lots of stuff. Now, we were doing lots of stuff, like these sorts of things, lots of promotions, lots more clanny sort of stuff. This is the kind of materials we were generating, spitting out, trying to encourage people, trying to get dealers buying, trying to get people swapping out, whatever we could to generate more sales. And it was great. We did lots of promotions. Acorn RISC Technologies were not only working on a network computer, they were starting to work with other people as well. Some of them very flaky, some of them a bit all over the shop. There was one company called Netfax. I don't know if anybody ever heard of them, but their idea was that rather than send faxes over phone lines, you would scan a document and send it as a pseudo fax over email. So that was there, and we're like, really? Does anybody actually want this? What's really funny is earlier on this year, there was a story about the NHS, who still use faxes, wanted to move from using faxes to sending stuff over email. It's like, it's 20 years ago, we were actually making a little box that you would just do that with. Anyway, it was kind of weird. But yeah, so they were doing that.